This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
Boy, what a day with a lot of legal news. Obviously, the Supreme Court made quite a splash with the immunity decision. We're going to get into that in a little bit. The jury in the Karen Reed murder case threw a lot of observers for quite a loop. But, and there's some other legal stories as well, but something that was somewhat overshadowed in the last 24 hours is something which could be really important, not only to the future of one specific company, but to the future of everybody in this country that ever flies on an airplane. And that's the fact that the U.S. is going to criminally charge Boeing and seek a guilty plea, according to sources. The U.S. Justice Department will criminally charge Boeing with fraud over 2 fatal crashes and ask the plane maker to plead guilty or face a trial. At least that's what's being reported. Someone who is a Boeing expert and certainly has covered quite a few trials in his day is a veteran broadcast journalist and nationally syndicated radio talk show host, Dominic Carter. How's it going, Dominic?
I'm doing well, Frank. How about yourself?
No complaints. Are you still walking in Memphis?
I'm now in the state of Missouri, in a beautiful resort area where I'm speaking later on today. And then you know how your life is, Frank, how my life is. As soon as I'm done, it's not the red-eye flight back to New York, but it's early in the morning at 6 a.m., and I'm 3 hours away from the St. Louis airport.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, we won't keep you, but we have a lot of great listeners in St. Louis and in Missouri. A lot of them just they bristle whenever I say Missouri instead of Missouri, and then you have about 10 to 20% of them that love Missouri as much as I do. You can listen to us.
You're correct.
You're
correct. Some say Missouri, some say Missouri. I say Missouri. Some say that certain parts of the state, you say Missouri. All I know is the Cardinals they're like big here in Missouri.
Well, if you miss me, since you're not here tonight, just tune to 11:20 a.m. or 98.7 FM on KMOX, and you can hear
one more time, 11:20 a.m.
or 98.7 FM. KMOX, one of the best radio stations in America. Honored to be on there.
98.7 FM.
Yeah,
okay,
great.
All right,
all right.
So you're going to keep me up all night long again?
Yeah. Well, what might keep you up is the fact that you might be worried that you might be flying on a Boeing airplane back to New York.
So why did you have to go there, Frank? Why did you have to go there?
So the Justice Department says they're planning, or at least this is what's being reported, but it's reported all from leaks from the Justice Department. They're planning to formally offer a plea agreement to Boeing, which includes a financial penalty and imposition of an independent monitor to audit the company's safety and compliance practices for 3 years. What do you make of this, Dominic?
It scares me to death, to be honest with you, because normally when the Justice Department or the feds come forward with something, when they nail you on something, it's normally because you've gotten away with so much more previously, right? And that's generally a foregone conclusion. It just seems that Boeing, the name just keeps coming up for faulty aircraft, for example. 30 people. 30 people, Frank, were injured right after that Europa,
right?
Europa. Thank you. 787 turbulence, right? And I guess here in America we're not used to that much aggressive turbulence. But can you imagine that? Not knowing, and it just, I don't know, Frank, it just seems to always involve a Boeing aircraft. It just always seems to involve where they're cutting corners to push out these aircraft faster. Then when you add the whistleblower, committed suicide. There was some question as to that. Officials ultimately said, yes, it was a suicide. It just seems like where there's smoke, there's fire as it relates to Boeing.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously, I don't want to pick on them too much because there's only two companies that do this, basically, right? So we don't want to necessarily make it as if they're there's 20 companies that you can choose from, and yet they're the ones that keep screwing up. However, to your point, everything that we've heard looks like they knew that they were cutting corners, and this was all done to save a few bucks and to make a few bucks and to rush these things into production. And you have to wonder if the kind of penalty that's being talked about here, if that's sufficient.
I don't think it goes far enough. I think with Boeing that, and let's face it, right? So many years ago, if I remember correctly, Frank, when I lived out in the state of Washington, I think Boeing was big in Seattle. I believe.
Oh yeah, that's my uncle worked for them and lived out there. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So, a lot of people in the community worked for Boeing, but even back then, we heard all the time, I'm talking about 40 years ago, Frank, with Boeing's name constantly coming up with cutting corners and with problems. And so here we are in 2024, and it's the same identical situation. And I don't know if America's been lucky thus far that we haven't seen much more damage as it relates to Boeing aircraft. The only thing I disagree with you about, Frank, is that I believe they should be picked on. The fact that they're one of two companies that generate aircraft at the humongous level that they do, if you're doing it in a way where you're cutting corners, you're risking lives.
Oh, no, I agree. Don't misunderstand me. It's just a lot of people always, when there's this many Boeing airplanes, and I take one instance of turbulence here and one instance of a door falling off here, they'll say that I'm magnifying problems that happen when you have that many airplanes on this, in the sky and around.
Enough.
But you're exactly right. I mean, the problems with what we've heard from Boeing is the fact that almost all of these problems were, one, preventable, and problems that they were warned about in advance. We did an interview, you might have heard it a couple of months ago, with Christine Negroni. These problems go back at least a decade, that the airplanes that are under so much scrutiny now that we know about. But so I'm eager to see where this goes. It's one of those things that I wonder how much of this is done so that the government can save face without doing much damage to a company, Boeing, that does a lot of business with the government. They got the Boeing Starliner, which of course that's having problems. They can't get the astronauts back home yet, and they're obviously integral to what's going on with all the military engagements that we're involved in now. But if people want to comment, I'd love to hear from you. 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. I know you are going to get ready for a big St. Louis night out, Dominic, so I'm not going to keep you. But I do have to ask
funny.
you.
That's funny. Hey, Frank, yeah. Before you ask me anything else, right? Be honest with the audience. People think that we all live these lives of luxury and so on, and the life of the party. Tell them the truth that of what our lives are really like, that we're constantly rushing, and that we don't get to enjoy the things that most people get to enjoy, because we're always on display. We're always rushing, always going somewhere, always catching a flight there, doing this, doing that. Tell them the truth, Frank Morano.
Well, look, I mean, I think folks who have heard my stories about handing over a credit card and then breathing a sigh of relief when it goes through, because that means you still have a little bit of money left on that credit card, they know I'm not exactly taking baths in champagne-filled bathtubs or anything like that. But so you're right. It's a lot of fun. I wouldn't trade places with anybody, but it certainly is not necessarily as glamorous as a lot of people might think it would be.
So Frank, let me just say this, right? So this area is called the Ozarks, all right? And I mean, the lake, absolute breathtaking, right? People rent boats, they rent paddle boats, they rent jet skis and so on. My day consists of, literally, my day here, right? Taking a nap midday, first the 3 o'clock show, taking a nap, taking a break to get something to eat with my family, getting to my laptop, finding a printer in a hotel, which you got to find one that works, and that takes time. And then you're getting ready for the midnight show, and that's it. That's it. You know, I don't get to enjoy the pools and everything else. I mean, I know people are saying cry me a river, but that's the reality of the situation.
Look, I've never been to the Ozarks. I'm told it's great. And, you know, Tony Orlando lives out there a part of the year. So maybe you see him when you're out there.
Tie your yellow ribbon
Exactly.
round the old oak tree. What's the rest of it? It's been 3. What's the rest of it?
No, it's been 3 long years. Do you still want me?
Me. Right. And what's the rest? If I don't wait, what's the rest?
You know,
you know that Curtis Lewa, our colleague.
No, exactly. I'm hesitant to sing with a scratchy throat.
He's going to pull the tape and he's going to mock us for the next month.
Yeah, no, I'm going to leave this one squarely to you, Dominic. But I like that show Ozark with Jason Bateman. That's a terrific show. I recommend it if you haven't seen it. But I do have to ask you about another infamous figure because, you know, Ozark does deal with a series of infamous figures on that show. Some of the attendees at Sunday's BET Awards, Black Entertainment Television, were a little taken aback when O.J. Simpson, who many people believe was a murderer, count me among them, in spite of what the verdict in that trial 30 years ago was.
Definitely count me among them.
But he's obviously a former NFL star, former actor. He was among those that was featured in the In Memoriam segment of the show. You know how they put up people that have died. They put up their picture. Oh, the people we lost this year. So according to the Hollywood Reporter, there was a noticeable silence that fell over the crowd when OJ's image was displayed. Because obviously, aside from what he did on the football field and in movies, he was somebody that a lot of folks believed killed Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. What do you make of the fact that they included him in the In Memoriam section, Dominic?
Absolutely disgusting. It should not have happened. Frank, you know, I'm trying to figure out the words where I'm not disrespectful to his memory. But they better be glad that I wasn't the executive producer of the show because it wouldn't have happened. And frankly, if I can be completely candid and honest with you, when you consider the problems and issues of communities of color, that's the last type of message that you want to send to honor. Because when you include him, you're really honoring him. Well, you can call it whatever you want,
course you are, yeah.
But you're honoring him. And he's not worthy of that type of honor. He's not worthy to be remembered by any of us. He threw that all away with that incident. Now, he was not convicted of the criminal crime, but when you've got the best lawyers that money can buy and Johnny Cochran, thus you're not convicted. But it's despicable that he was included. And again, when you look at, like, for example, Washington Square Park, right? In New York City, what happened, the Gay Pride Parade. Mostly people of color out there acting like complete fools, rioting this past weekend. The police couldn't get it under control, punching, kicking each other. There are a lot of problems, Frank, and everybody sweeps it under the rug. Nobody wants to be called racist, and thus the dysfunction continues. And when you honor OJ at a BET Awards dinner, award show, by mentioning the fact that he died this year, one of the officials that died this year. That's not a mere coincidence. That's something that's done intentionally.
Oh, no, absolutely.
And you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
And, when Robert Blake died, and he was never as big as OJ, but he had a heyday as an actor, and he had kind of a similar thing where the jury found him not guilty, but a lot of people believe that he did commit that murder. When Robert Blake died just a few days before the Oscars, he was totally absent from the Academy Awards. They didn't include him in the in memoriam or anything like that. I think because the producers of that show didn't want to have the same discussion that we're having right now.
Right. And I mean, listen, you can't take OJ's accomplishments away from him on the football field, even though I feel that should be removed based on what society feels that he did. Notice I said what society feels. We know what the court system ruled, but based on what society feels, what he did, all of those commercials for Hertz running through the airport and so on, he threw all of that away. He threw that away. The Bronco chase, he threw all of that away. And thus, he passed away, and that's that. I tend to remember the families that are left mourning based on what many of us believe of what he did.
If people want to comment, you can certainly do so. 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. What do you say, Dominic, to people that wonder what the barometer should be? How do you pick? What should the line be in terms of who gets included in an in memoriam and somebody that does not? If they're convicted of a crime, okay, maybe that's the red line. But if someone's not convicted, how do we determine, okay, well, we think this person's a bad guy, and it doesn't have to just be OJ. Some might say the same thing of Bill Cosby, and I think some people, including our friend Peter King, did say the same thing about Michael Jackson when he died. How should we judge who gets to be included in the in memoriam segments?
It's hard, and it has to go on a case-by-case basis, because when you look at Michael Jackson, for example, right, and I got the opportunity to meet him and to talk to him, right, and let me tell you, Frank, that man's life was not easy, right? So as I walked into the room, right, his makeup artist, he had just walked back into a private room, and I walked in, and I startled him, and he screamed one of those loud Michael Jackson, no, seriously. And I felt immediately sad because it was his makeup artist was there trying to fix his hair, and it was just very sad. But when you look at what Michael Jackson was accused of over and over and over, where do we draw the line? I don't know. It's a very dangerous, slippery slope.
Well, for instance, Bill Cosby, he incredible entertainer and someone that had his conviction thrown out, but someone that a lot of people believed behaved inappropriately, to put it mildly, with women. If Bill Cosby were to die, should he be in these in memoriam segments for the Oscars, the Emmys, Golden Globes, BET? None.
No. And the reason being, those of us that are in the industry know that those Bill Cosby stories were out there for years of what he was doing. So, for example, I won't name any names, but I've had some female friends that I saw him look at, and he wanted to mentor. And I felt so strongly that I pulled the individuals aside and said, hey, did Bill Cosby do anything to you? No. Did he try and hit on you? No. But you never know, Frank. You never know when people are telling you the truth or when they may be embarrassed. But those Bill Cosby stories, what he was accused of, that was just the public stuff. He was accused of that for years. Well, and so it's a slippery slope.
It is indeed. So there's no hard and fast rule. You just got to take each one as they come.
If there's a criminal conviction, and it depends on for what, it's, again, I say it has to go by each one. I would not want to be the individual that has to make those type of decisions. I know it's done by committee, but ultimately you have an executive producer that will make the final decision. And I just feel it should be done in a way that it doesn't offend people if that's possible, because everything offends some person for some reason.
That is true. All right, Dominic, have a great rest of the trip in Missouri. If you run into Tony Orlando down there, give him our best.
And so 11:20 a.m. and I'll be back on the air tomorrow before leaving, but 11:20 a.m. and 98.7 FM.
Boom.
That's where I can hear you.
Boom.
Locally.
KMOX, one of the best radio stations in America. Beautiful signal all over the area you're in. You're going to love it.
Okay, I'm going to turn it on right now.
All right. Check it out, Dominic. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
646-720-0635. Oh, I forgot to ask Dominic about Justin Timberlake. We'll give him a break. But we'll let you be heard instead. 646-720-0635. Speaking of KMOX, Dave is in St. Louis. Hey there, Dave.
What's going on?
Sorry?
You hear me?
Yeah, Dave. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Hey, so I'm an aircraft mechanic, and I've been listening to all the news religiously, and Boeing manufactures a lot of airplanes, but I think something a lot of people don't think about. For one, it sucks hearing them get blamed for things such as turbulence, but once these aircraft leave Boeing, they're no longer maintained by Boeing. They're going to these airlines. These planes are being flown like crazy. And there's wear and tear on these airplanes. We're not maintaining them once they leave Boeing. So,
now, first of all, I wouldn't blame them for turbulence, right? I mean, that could happen on any airplane. That's not a big deal. But what about the stories that we have heard that whether it's the run up to Flight 370, whether it's Flight 800,
sure,
that there were some systemic problems with some of these Boeing aircraft that internal Boeing employees told the higher ups about, and they basically looked the other way. Do you give those any credence?
Absolutely. But when I see, lately, if a tire falls off an airplane, if Boeing made it, we're getting blamed for it. Now, that tire could have been involved in 5 hard landings in the last 6 months, which would have been pilot error. It could have gone through
Sure.
2-3 tire changes. I just don't think that they immediately just go right for Boeing. And I don't think that's fair when these planes are not maintained by Boeing once they go to airlines. Why aren't the airlines maintainers or their practices being scrutinized?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Dave. Dave, thanks for straightening us out a bit. I'm still thinking that there should be some accountability here vis-a-vis criminal prosecution or something like that. But I understand what Dave is saying. 646-720-0635. You know what we tend to do as people and in the media? We tend to jump on trends, right? And I mean, it's only natural. It's human nature. It's media nature. You tend to go with the flow. I do think Boeing has been really irresponsible in putting profits before people, though. I absolutely do think that's the case. But I think what Dave said there makes a lot of sense. If you check out Christine Negroni's website, she was great when we had her on the show. If you're not familiar with her, she's a published author, speaker, broadcaster who specializes in aviation and travel. And she has covered this Boeing story since the Malaysia situation. And there have been some real problems with several of these Boeing aircraft. So judge for yourself. 646-720-0635. Jerry is in New Jersey. Hi, Jerry.
Yeah, hi, Frank. When it comes to O.J. Simpson, I don't have any opinion on whether he's guilty or innocent. And that's not what I'm calling about. What I would say this, though, I would not understate the fact that he was found civilly liable for what was done in this particular case, because it's not a case where a jury found him. You got to look at specific facts, and the specific facts are not like someone typically speeding, which they shouldn't be, and they end up killing someone in a reckless manner, etc. When you look at these specific facts, these people, apparently were multiple times stabbed, and I understand their heads were almost cut off. So when you're civilly found liable for that set of facts, or some type of facts like that, that's quite different than your typical civil liability. Even when someone dies, like in an airplane crash, when you were drinking and you happen to crash the plane, for example, when you shouldn't have been. All bad, but this is a whole nother level when you're civilly found liable for something like this, the way these people died.
Well, yeah, I mean, and Jerry, you also can't forget the fact that even after that civil case and even after the first murder case, he was then convicted of armed robbery. So it's not exactly like he led a monastic existence and became this big pillar of the community. He doubled down on being a criminal after that. So even putting aside the fact that he was acquitted of a double murder, he was still convicted of armed robbery for that case in Nevada.
Absolutely. And so I'm not sure, because I didn't hear what he was sort of honored for in some manner.
Well, no. So you've seen award shows, right?
Right.
So at award shows, whether it's the Academy Awards, Country Music Awards, in this case, the BET Awards, they take all of the entertainers, not all of them, but many of them that have died in the past year. And they'll say something like, oh, let's take a look back at the entertainers we lost this past year. And it'll say in memoriam, and it'll say, and then they put O.J. Simpson's picture up there and his name. So he was listed just in the in memoriam section with all the other entertainers who were black that passed away.
Well, it certainly seems disrespectful to the people who are still here, whose family members died, and who he was apparently found civilly liable, as far as I recall. So in that case, I guess I'm on the side of that they shouldn't have done that. It's bad taste for sure.
All right, Jerry, thank you. Appreciate it. 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Get the most out of your summer. Take advantage of Invite Health's Independence Day sale. Buy any Invite Health product at suggested retail and get the second bottle free. Call us now to order by phone at 800-463-7575. That's 800-463-7575. Get your BOGO on Beauty Collagen Gummies today for healthy summertime skin. Mention WABC when you call 800-463-7575. That's 800-463-7575.
Janine Pirro here for Colonial Metals Group. Colonial Metals Group helps Americans protect their future with the most trusted store of wealth in human history, physical gold and silver. If you're retiring or retired, go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/Pirro for your free Janine Pirro Colonial Metals Group Retirement Protection Kit, or call 800-965-8004. 800-965-8004 now to receive a free home safe and up to $7,500 in free silver.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
In the morning you go gunning for the man who stole your water, and you fight till he is done, but they catch you at the border, and the mourners are all singing as they drag you by your feet, but the hangman isn't hanging, and they put you on the street. Yeah, you go back, Jack, do it again.
Steely Dan, Do It Again. This is a birthday bumper music selection from my friend Dan DeMauro. Dan DeMauro was one of the 3 directors for a documentary that I produced called Get Me Roger Stone. Still available on Netflix. You could see it, and I think it still holds up. In fact, I think if you look at what's happened over the last 7 years since that documentary came out, I think that documentary is even more relevant today than it was at the time that we made it. But Dan is a great guy and a very talented filmmaker, no question about it. Now, obviously, yesterday was a big day when it comes to the Supreme Court. And, I just reached out to Professor Erwin Chemerinsky, who's one of the smartest guys in terms of Chemerinsky, one of the smartest guys in terms of analyzing constitutional law that there is. He may jump on with us in the next minute or two, but if not, I wanted to give you my take. I'm talking about the Trump immunity decision, where the justices ruled 6-3 that presidents do have absolute immunity for official acts. They don't have absolute immunity for unofficial acts. So basically, if you're carrying out your duty of being president and you may commit a crime, you can't be prosecuted for that. If you go out and rob a liquor store and, with a gun and hold someone hostage in the process, it's going to be difficult to argue that that was done in service of your official acts. But the problem with this ruling is that there's a lot of gray area. How do you know what an official act is? For instance, if I'm the president, I have the absolute right to issue pardons. So if I get a bribe, either cash in my pocket or say a direct campaign contribution or a donation to my presidential library, if I get a bribe in order to issue a pardon, is that a crime or is it not? Is that an official act or is it not? The example that several of the justices used in their dissent, including Justice Sotomayor, was if you used SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political opponent, would that be a crime? And these are not easy questions to answer. So essentially what the Supreme Court said is they're sending this back to the lower court, and it'll be up to, in the case of Trump, Judge Chutkan, but for other presidents that face a similar issue, the trial judge, the district judge, to make the determination of what's an official act and what's not. Here was Alan Dershowitz, a noted legal scholar, Harvard law professor. He was on Katz and Cosby last night. This is what he said. He seemed to think that the decision was a good one. Alan Dershowitz taking a second there. But, as far
There's nothing in the Constitution that gives judges immunity. They just created it for themselves. It would be unthinkable for the third branch of government, the executive branch, to have no immunity when the other two branches do have immunity. This was a constitutionally solid decision.
Others disagree. Eric Siegel, who was just on this program last week, he was on The Back Room with Andy Ostroy, and he explained the 3 points of immunity. I'm not sure, Elias, if this is after the decision or if this is before. Oh, okay, this was after. Here's Eric Siegel.
The court sets up 3 buckets. There's one bucket where the president is exercising core power, commander-in-chief, the pardon power, take care of the laws are faithfully executed. Things the constitutional text says it's the president's job. He's absolutely immune for anything done in any of those capacities. Mm-hmm. And what that means is really confusing. Because if the president is walking down Fifth Avenue with his attorney general and says, you know what, Eric Siegel is a true threat to the security of the United States. Oh, look, there's Eric. As my commander-in-chief, as the commander-in-chief of the military, I really do believe Eric's a threat. What do you think? He's a terrible, terrible threat. Get rid of him. All right, good. Takes out a gun, kills me in cold blood. He might have immunity. That's an official act under his commander-in-chief power. So that first bucket is narrow but terrible. Second bucket, he's not doing something in his core powers, but Congress has authorized him to do something. Well, then he has what the court calls presumptive immunity. No one knows what that means. Mm-hmm. Third bucket, he has no immunity at all for personal acts. We didn't need the court to tell us that.
Well, so I think this is a very poor decision. I have to be honest. I'm not going to disagree with Alan Dershowitz on the merits here. He's much smarter. I'm not a lawyer, so who am I to disagree with someone that was teaching at Harvard for 50 years? But when you have the Supreme Court ruling that presidents have broad criminal immunity for official acts and effectively placing the presidency beyond the reach of criminal law officially for the first time in the country's history, this 6-3 decision, really along ideological lines, it's, I think, potentially very troubling because, and it has nothing to do with Donald Trump or the case here. Well, I mean, it does, but this is something that I think could be troubling for all future presidents because, I am someone that I was hoping for a while that we would see both President Bush, Vice President Cheney, and President Obama tried for war crimes. I see very little possibility that that happens now, at least under American law. There may still be an opportunity under international law, but I was reminded, and I'm probably the 100th person that you heard say this today. Remember the interview that Richard Nixon did with Frost? Remember the Frost-Nixon interviews where Nixon made this infamous statement?
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal. By definition. Exactly.
So that's where we are. We're now in a position where the court is saying if the president does it, it isn't illegal as long as it's an official act. How do you know whether something's an official act? How far can you go? And is it going to, it all is going to depend on whatever judge you get. Whatever district judge you get could decide this is an official act, that's not. So I thought this was a very disappointing ruling, and I don't see it being, I don't think it's good for the country. I think one of my great concerns, and I've been very consistent on this when Democrats have been in office, when Republicans have been in office, one of my great concerns has been about the imperial presidency, the growing power of the presidency. And we're becoming less and less a democracy, less and less a republic, and more and more an elected monarchy, because we've seen presidents of both parties continue to ignore precedent, ignore congressional rulings, ignore the law, and just do their own thing. And my fear is this is going to make that potentially even worse. Now, politically, it's great news for President Trump. President Trump's having a very good week. But my view is even if you're a Trump fan, I don't think you should be too happy about this ruling because it's basically made up. It's basically made up by the Supreme Court. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives presidents immunity. And the Supreme Court's failure to define what an official act is, it leaves so much wiggle room for every president from now on who breaks the law to basically say, oh, well, I was just doing it in my official duties as president. Look, it becomes difficult. Oh, and by the way, this is not in the abstract. Now, I don't think anybody could say, even the staunchest Trump supporter in the world, I don't think anybody could say that paying hush money to Stormy Daniels was being done in the furtherance of an official act as president. And yet, that's one of the cases that's already been brought against President Trump. And now they're seeking to have that case overturned. Now, it's not the hush money aspect of it, but they're seeking to have that case delayed at least, or one of the charges in that case overturned on the basis of this decision. I think it's very problematic. So you still are not going to be able to go out and kidnap someone, go out and rape someone, because you can't say that's part of your official act as president. But this idea that they don't define what an official act that you get immunity is for, it leaves a lot of wiggle room. What do you think? 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. I'll begin with David in the Boogie Down Bronx. Hi, David.
Yes, good morning, Frank.
Morning.
I am deeply troubled by this, and I think you indicated that you are as well. And let me just give you a couple of things. One of the things that I'm worried about is, and this could be an official act, let's say there's some type of civil unrest under a President Trump or even a President Biden. He could order his agents to shoot protesters. That would fall under his duties because that's law enforcement enforcing the laws. A President Trump or President Biden couldn't be prosecuted for that. He could order his people at the border to shoot women and children crossing the border illegally. That would be considered an official act. There are so many things that a president could now do, and it doesn't matter who it is, that now he's beyond the reach of the law. And clearly the founders did not intend that, or they would have put it in the Constitution. This decision today was basically created. It's a fantasy. It doesn't exist in the law. And I will disagree with Mr. Dershowitz because, listen, he's become very partisan. I don't know if it's because people don't talk to him anymore on Martha's Vineyard or whatever it is, but he's no longer trusted when it comes to legal analysis. I'm sorry. And this is wrong. And again, I'm a Biden supporter. You know that. President Biden should not have these powers.
Right, no
Donald
president
Trump
should. No president should.
Exactly. No one should
I don't
have these powers.
I don't think this is a partisan issue. I realize in the short term, Republicans may be happy about this because this means that the trial before Judge Chutkan probably won't happen before the election. But the kind of the foundation of at least the last 35 years, 40 years, really post Bork, the kind of the foundation of conservative judicial interpretation is originalism. And if you're an originalist, if you believe that the Constitution should be interpreted as written, you should be having kittens today because there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the president absolute immunity for official acts and then doesn't define what the official acts are. David, thank you. I largely agree with you. But if you, this is, I don't want to go too far here because really since the 70s, the operational guidance from the Department of Justice has been that presidents can't be prosecuted while they're in office anyway. But Ralph Nader, who's a brilliant Harvard-trained attorney who I have a lot of respect for, he called this a judicial push against the American Republic. And he said, and I think with good reason, that Jefferson, Madison, Franklin, and George Washington would have been stunned. If you go back and read the Federalist Papers, there's nothing in there, that contemplates the idea of absolute immunity for official acts. None. I think we actually need more prosecutions of presidents for what they're doing in office. I don't think you should be able to lie us into a war. I don't think you should be able to, murder American citizens with drones without a warrant. And yet you can very easily claim that that's an official act now. I think it's bogus. Let me know what you think. 646-720-0635. Robert in Suffolk. Hello there.
Good morning, Frank.
Morning.
I believe the decision was constitutionally correct. The president doesn't have any more or less power than the president did before. And it's defined by the Constitution. And Mr. Siegel was correct in his analysis analog with the three buckets. You can't just shoot protesters unless they are seriously breaking the law, okay? Because they have a right to protest.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I agreed. Robert, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not so sure how sound constitutionally it is, but I appreciate your view. If you want to weigh in, feel free to do so. 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Here's a happy tune.
A happy tune.
You'll love to croon.
You love to croon.
They call it Dean's song.
Hey, you don't seem to understand.
Catchy as can be.
I must agree.
The melody.
The melody.
They call it Dean's song.
Looks like I'm gonna have to explain this thing. You don't dig this scene. I'm saying Dean. The song is Sam's song.
Sam, you're just a ham.
But Dean, here's the scam. The song was named after Sam.
Sam who?
Sam Houston.
Love this song. This is from the EO11 album with, basically it's a Rat Pack compilation album. This, of course, is Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin doing their version of Sam's song. It was today in 1962 that American businessman Sam Walton opened the very first Walmart, then known as Wal-Mart. Now there's no more hyphen. In Rogers, Arkansas, and it was the start of what would become the largest retail sales chain in the United States. You know, I'm reminded by a listener who just texted me, and we'll take, I'll go through your text and email a bit later. You can text me at 816-8-MORANO. That's 816-8-MORANO. Or you can email me at frank.morano at redappleaudionetworks.com. He writes, John Dean of Watergate fame said that he thinks that Richard Nixon would have kept his job with a ruling such as this. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a very good chance that would have been the case. It's difficult to know because, look, if you break in to an opposing political party's headquarters and then lie about it and basically organize a cover-up to prevent people from discovering your involvement, can you really say that's an official act as president? I don't know. But it would be much easier because, after all, as President Nixon said,
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal. By definition. Exactly.
All right, a couple of minutes until the top of the hour. My son had his first day of summer camp yesterday, and he really seemed to enjoy it. So I'm pleased to hear that. Did not get upset and was in a delightful mood when we picked him up. Jeff is in Queens. Hi there, Jeff.
Hello, Frank. A couple things. Finish business. Did you get sick from the sushi that you ate that day 2 weeks ago?
No.
Okay. Secondly, the song from last night was called L.A. Cowboy, Lonesome L.A. Cowboy by that band NRPS, which referenced to Marty Mull. Third, Frank, on the Supreme Court, you're a man of great wisdom. Can't you say it's always been a political?
Of course.
As the parlance today, the parlance today is it's become politicized. And hasn't it always been? But America has pretended that it's not been for 50 years when it has been all along.
You know, when I go ahead.
Yeah. And last thing is, on the other Supreme Court ruling, I hope you can talk me down because I'm really on the edge about the Chevron case. I feel like now that this has opened the gates to millions of people becoming sick. Because of, or maybe to see the opposite side, argue the opposite side. I'll say now you don't have to go through 500 hoops to build a house because regulations will be stripped away.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold off on breaking down the Chevron doctrine because I have mixed feelings about it and I'm still learning about it. And I'm gonna actually try to have some people that are a bit more studied on that issue than I am. It is I like that in that not the ruling itself, but I am interested in that because that's one of those rulings which the conservatives and the liberals have kind of switched sides with how they view agencies' ability to do certain things. But I'm not going to get into Chevron at the moment. Maybe tomorrow we'll do something on that because I'm still breaking that down. One of the most interesting things that I saw written on it was by Matt Stoller in his big newsletter, which broke that down and the history of how Chevron deference came to be. But I'm going to hold off on that for now. But if it's an interesting time to be watching the Supreme Court, that's for sure. So first, the court makes it easier for judges to overrule agency decisions, and now the court makes it much easier for plaintiffs to sue agencies. So long after the regulation is issued, you wonder if there's a pattern. But as far as your other point, in terms of whether or not the court has always been political, that's exactly what Eric Siegel said, the law professor who was on this program last week, who I just cited earlier, and we just played the audio from. In fact, he wrote a book called Supreme Myths: Why the Supreme Court is Not a Court and its justices are not judges. And he basically says the same thing that you've said, that it's always been political, but neither here nor there. All right. Now, Carmine's off from summer camp today, so we're only doing 3 days a week because apparently if we did 5 days a week, the tuition would have been even more astronomical. And, I'm glad that he's enjoying it so far. And I'm glad that he's getting outside and they don't just keep him cooped up in the room all day long. So that's good. Help control the pet population. Get your dog or cat spayed or neutered.
Economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k as the stock market braces for impact. I'm Larry Kudlow, and I urge you to fortify your savings with physical gold with my friends at Priority Gold. To learn how gold and silver can help diversify your savings, please call 1-800-405-GOLD or just visit PriorityGold.com to get a free gold information guide. That's 1-800-405-GOLD.